Good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Mullis, and I'm here today to present a topic that is very personal to all of us, and that is the connection between exclusion and hearing loss. First, before I begin my presentation, I would like to ask you guys whether or not you think that we have a perfect inclusive society, and if we don't, how do we get there? What we have is indeed an exclusive world, and we with hearing loss know this. So before I begin to talk about inclusion, which is the goal, I'm going to have to unfortunately talk about exclusion. Many of us have dealt with exclusion in different spheres all our lives, and firstly I'm going to talk about exclusion within the institutional sphere. One form of exclusion in the institutional sphere is at school. All of us have gone to school. All of us are pretty much grown-ups. And most of us have painful memories from going to school. One particularly egregious example of exclusion in a school environment is when a teacher, the person of authority, refuses to help you out as a person who unfortunately is not able to fully take in information that's verbal. Many people have had teachers that have refused to clarify if they couldn't hear, teachers that refuse to wear FM systems, teachers that put the children with other children who are very loud, don't try to keep a quiet class environment, and don't try to create the best possible sound environment. Another example of this is within the services industry. We often have to use phone calls to reach things like bank accounts, travel information, getting a package. So unfortunately, these are still things that make us as hard of hearing people feel excluded. A third example of this that we all face on our day-to-day lives is public transportation. Many of us have missed trains and buses due to changes in scheduling that we weren't aware of. And while they often reimburse us, we think it would be a cheaper solution to instead just offer a text-based program. And lastly, I want to talk about public access television and film. So this is partially taxpayer-financed films, theaters, cinemas, and so forth. We attend these, our taxpayer money goes into these, and yet often they're not captioned and not accessible to people like us. And we don't think this is fair. The next form of exclusion I'm going to talk about is one that really hits home for a lot of us, and that's exclusion in the social sphere. One example that we often face in our day-to-day lives is going to a restaurant with a group of friends. Humans are social creatures. We like hanging out with people. We like laughing. Yes, even when you're hard of hearing, you like talking to people. But often, many of us find ourselves in situations when we're at the end of a table, when people start laughing or there's some sort of hot discussion going on, and we are completely confused. And when we ask for clarification, what do we hear? Never mind. That is the phrase that we hate the most. And unfortunately, I want to talk about hypocrisy among us. And this includes myself. Before I had come to this study session, I thought, oh, I'd never be one of those people who says never mind. But I find myself with other hard of hearing people after having to clarify over and over again, or clarify a joke that kind of is out of context and you have to overanalyze the joke, that it becomes kind of stale, but at the same time I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that kind of comment. So this leads into my next point. How do we create inclusion? How do we create inclusion among us and in the society as a whole? So we've seen legislative gains. One of the major points of the study session was to discuss the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But we want to stress also that practices matter as well. Oftentimes there's inclusion of us for the wrong reasons. One kind of absurd story that I have to share is when I booked a ticket on a flight to, I think it might have been Tel Aviv. I said I was hard of hearing, and when I got to the airport, instead of getting some sort of text-based assistance, instead they offered me a wheelchair. This is the type of inclusion that is done with the right spirit, but not the right information. And that's why it's upon us to raise awareness for people around us through our activities in IFHOHYP, through our abilities to work with hearing aid companies who are constantly innovating and constantly trying to include us as well in a world that is dominated by hearing. Lastly, I want to stress personal empowerment. We need to be confident in ourselves in order to ask for things that we deserve. We need to be able to feel confident in ourselves to help people who are like us to create more hearing-friendly environments and also be more hearing-friendly ourselves. As I said before, I'm not the most hearing-friendly person. I realize that now, and because of this conference, realized that I really need to work on myself in order to change society. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.